After securing a couple of regions, the war effort ground to a halt. The enemy had considerably better weapons and mechs and I was falling behind. But I had one last idea. I was going to go deep into enemy territory and try to ambush a cargo caravan to secure better weapons and blueprints to try to turn this campaign around. I snuck in, found the caravan, and intercepted it. Now came the hard part. With 4 poorly equipped mechs, I had to go up against 6 superior enemies. I had 1 heavy mech, 2 mediums, and a light one that was very weak but had a powerful sniper rifle. If I had any chance of defeating the superior force, I had to keep my sniper alive. And when I loaded into the map, my sniper was out of position and everyone was gunning for them. My first attempt did not go well. I failed to protect the sniper, so I tried again. And this time, with the same mechs, the same enemies, and the same tools, I managed to win. The only difference was a clever use of time, and in this video, I'm going to talk about that. Phantom Brigade is a new turn-based strategy game by Brace Yourself Games. The scenario I described above is just one battle in a very long campaign, but it was the moment I realized this game had something special going on. Compared to other tactics games I've played, it somehow allows for better strategic execution, which then makes you as the player feel particularly good. So what's so special about this game? Well, first and foremost, their prime mechanic is the passage of time. Where other turn-based games have you interacting with action points every turn, Phantom Brigade has you plan your moves 5 seconds at a time. Now, games have messed around with time as a mechanic for a good while now, but the main difference I want to talk about here are twofold. The first is pretty simple. You're given perfect information on who your enemies are, what their builds are, and most important of all, you get intricate details on what their actions are going to be like over the next 5 seconds. Now, you might be thinking, if you know exactly what your enemy is going to do, where's the challenge? The thing about Phantom Brigade is it wants you to focus on one thing, and that is the execution of your strategy against whatever odds you might be facing. And the way you execute on your strategy in Phantom Brigade is through their major innovation, which is the timeline. Now, if you've messed around with video editing software, this timeline seems familiar. The actions and commands you take all fall on this timeline and they can be manipulated using it. Ultimately, this is where you'll be spending most of your time in a round. To give some examples, this is how you queue up a move command, here's what attacking looks like, and much like the timeline in video editing software, you can scrub through the timeline to examine the state of the field at every microsecond. I do want to take a second and give props to how smoothly this timeline feels. Honestly, video editing software doesn't feel this fluid, and yet this game somehow managed to pull it off. It is also worth calling out the intuitiveness of their UX. This is a completely new input model that they're trying to teach players, and minus a few snags I'll get into later, this timeline works well and quickly becomes second nature. Now, it is worth calling out I'm a bit biased here since, well, I know how to manipulate timelines like this, but it wouldn't surprise me if less familiar people also found it intuitive. Okay. So the major thing about this timeline is that it lets you laser focus on making strategic decisions and executing them almost perfectly. As you plan out your turn, you can scrub through the timeline to see how the battle will play out, and use that information to refine your strategy until you've planned the perfect turn. And when that turn is over, that's still only 5 seconds of the battle. And just like the timeline of these videos, your timeline can start to look pretty complicated as you play the game. This gives battles in Phantom Brigade a very different feel compared to other tactics games. One other thing worth noting is that Phantom Brigade doesn't exactly have a large pool of verbs that the player can do. You can move, dodge, attack, defend, and maybe an extra ability or two. And where other games lean heavily on classes, leveling, and abilities to provide some variance in gameplay, Phantom Brigade manages to hit a comparable, or dare I say even a higher level of strategic depth using a small set of tools. Honestly, higher might not be the right term here, but the point is Phantom Brigade feels different and feels pretty fresh. Now let's get back to the scenario I outlined at the start of the video. From the get-go, I had a pretty big problem to solve. The AI was targeting my glass cannon. This immediately starts me off with a clear first turn objective: keep that mech alive. One subtle thing that you might have noticed that is worth calling out about battles in Phantom Brigade is that they rarely waste any time getting you into the action. If you contrast this to the start of a battle in another tactics game, you'll see that usually not a lot goes on at the start, and usually there's a bit of moving around the map before the action takes place. In Phantom Brigade, they waste no time getting you into the action, and I imagine that's pretty deliberate, because combat can take a good bit longer than other games when you're messing around with 4 units and trying to map out all their moves. Okay, back to the fight again. The reason I needed to protect this mech was because it was my main damage dealer, largely because it had the only good weapon I owned, which was capable of one-shotting tanks and dealing significant damage to other mechs. In order to get the most out of this weapon, I elected to put it on a light mech frame that's really fast but has very few hit points. Another mechanic that comes into play here is the health system. Phantom Brigade uses a component-based health system. The arms and the legs of the mech can take damage, and if they reach 0, that part breaks off. If you lose your legs, your mech could collapse, and losing an arm could mean losing a valuable weapon. This all meant that even the smallest amount of damage could be detrimental to this mech and my strategy. Now all this compounded to deliver a very high stakes first turn that wasted no time getting my attention. My first try with this fight went very poorly. I tried to have my sniper run away, but even at range it took too many hits, and by turn 2 the enemy had destroyed it by knocking its feet out from under it. So for my second attempt I needed to find some cover. The problem was the map I was on was mostly open forest. So instead I set my other 3 mechs to form a sort of line and commanded them to hunker down behind their shields. And then I had the sniper run behind them to get to safety. The idea was that the tankier mechs would absorb and deflect as many bullets as possible, reducing the risk that the glass cannon would take any damage. Another subtle thing that came into play here and is worth mentioning is how projectiles are handled in this game. They aren't faked or approximated like you might see in other games, they're actually shot out of the weapons and travel down trajectories. When they come into contact with the surface, they get blocked. So when the turn executed, my sniper took off running. The other 3 mechs formed a meaty shield and blocked the insane onslaught of projectiles that were coming towards the sniper. But the sniper survived. Turn 1 ended with the sniper alive and in a far better flanking position. From there, the sniper began picking off targets one at a time, and the heavier mechs tangled with the AI distracting them. Now a lot of subtle things came together to allow for these 5 seconds to play out this way. The highly aggressive turn 1, the component system, the projectile system, and most important of all, the flexibility of the timeline system and just how much control it gives you. Now this was just one 5-second turn in just one battle at the start of a very long campaign. Phantom Brigade has a lot of potential for moments like these, and they frequently happen. Hopefully this demonstrated how a few systems and one well-implemented innovation can come together to completely change the way the genre feels. Now this game has a few more exciting things going for it, and I might do a follow-up video to describe them, but for now I'll leave it here. I did mention earlier that there was one snag with the timeline, and that is the way the wait command works. It feels really clunky to use. You have to set the duration by dragging your cursor in the world, which doesn't feel very intuitive, and more importantly, it makes it difficult to align your wait times precisely with other actions. Now there are better ways they could have implemented this, like taking a page from how you can adjust time on a clip in a video editing software, but honestly they got so much right that this really is a minor thing, and I imagine they can improve on it in a sequel, which I hope they do, so you should get out there, buy this game, and support the devs. Alright gamers, that's going to be it for today. I appreciate you all, and I'm really grateful for the likes and subscriptions. If you enjoyed this video, please consider appeasing the algorithm gods by liking, leaving a comment, and even subscribing. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.